we are okay. That we are, I don't know what it's live stream, that we are doing on remote working. This is the continuation of what we had last week, 10 days ago on the remote working. So today it's more of a practical tool. That's why we have divided sessions where you will have a 10-minute slot. Yeah. So the format will be 5 minutes presentation, 5 minutes Q&A. To go a bit more in detail on what has been done before. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
That's phone in the background from my house phone.
No problem. So I think we have all been introduced, or should we do a short round online round table?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to start, Darren? Yeah.
Okay, so hey everyone, thank you for having me today. I'm Tara Nixon and I work for a Microsoft partner called Clear People. And I really work on user adoption and change management in terms of the Microsoft stack. So I help companies to adopt technologies to allow them to work from home pretty much. And I've been doing this for the last 5 years. Before that, I was in the Google space. So I was helping companies, clients, and users adopt Google for Business. So when it comes to the current kind of climate and what we're facing, it's really about, I have the knowledge of the end user and those kind of common pain points that people will go through when they move from using one type of technology or they go through quite a change in their working environments. And I help users through the change and go through the change curve. So that's what I do.
Thank you, Taryn. Artie, do you want to?
Yeah. So hi, everyone. Thanks again also for having me. I work for Deloitte. I have been in professional services for over 15 years and have kind of worked around the firm. So from audit to advisory, tax to consulting, where I've been for over a decade now. Most recently, in the last couple of years, I've moved into a role supporting the consulting business in the UK in and around the well-being of our people. So that's been looking at everything from a mind, body, and purpose perspective. So obviously, with everyone being at home and in the current climate, there's a lot of stress related to what people could be feeling, a lot of talk around mental health and supporting people's well-being. And so I'm hoping to contribute to that conversation today.
Yes, and I'm very keen in hearing what you have to say, because it's
oh, no pressure.
One of the key elements that came out of the discussion 10 days ago was really about well-being and how can we work on that, because even from the chairs that people where people are sitting on to the space they are, we tend not to think about it, but I'm sure you have thought about it structurally. So we're very keen to hear. Matt.
Oh, yeah, I'm Matt Goddard. I'm a digital program manager and sort of remote work consultant, really. So I've spent the last 20 years working with digital delivery teams, both on-premise and remotely, and specifically in the last 10 years working with remote teams across the world and within organizations to help them to migrate from sort of face-to-face on-prem type collaboration practices to remote practices. 2 years ago, my colleague Gary Walker and I wrote a book called Ready for Remote, which was specifically designed to help organizations to manage that difference, between sort of building their digital collaboration capability and be ready for remote, because a lot of companies don't want to, although obviously at the moment we're all remote, a lot of companies didn't want to just take that leap to go from in-house to remote. So what do you do to prepare the way in order for them to have that digital capability that underpins remote work? And so we've been doing a lot of work to help our clients and individuals to sort of bridge that gap and to define what that capability looks like for them.
Thank you. And Ivo, it's Ivo or Ivo? How should I pronounce it?
It's Ivo.
Ivo, okay.
Awesome. Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. Why I'm here? I'm a huge remote work advocate. I personally am working remotely on and off since 8 years, but actually 3 years ago, when we lived in the States and noticed that there is some huge shift going on around the workplace flexibility and remote work, we started to dig deeper and see if we could bridge the expectations of the new workforce and the struggle on company side with the talent shortage. And we based on the research, we decided that education is the key. So since 2017, we are educating the world on how to work remotely, and it's not Evo. We partner up with top remote companies, mainly from the US, like Envision, Buffer, Dois, like all the good stuff, and we put together a couple of education programs for managers, for HR, and for individuals. All of them are certification programs, as well as we are running several initiatives like the Remote Future Summit, which is the largest virtual conference on remote work, Global Work from Home Day. We have a close community of managers from all over the world that are exchanging their experience on how to successfully distribute a team. So various initiatives, but the common denominator is to help individuals and companies learn how to work remotely, how to lead distributed teams, how to build the culture from the HR perspective. Yeah, so that's what we do. So I hope I will be able to deliver the perspective from various companies around the world, although we mainly focus on working with clients in States.
So I am told now that we are broadcasting to everybody. So while we get everybody to connect, so what we will be doing now, we will be waiting to start. But I think that we will be starting with Ivo. Then we will be going to Tarin, then Matt, and Artie. I'm reserving you for the end, as I think we can also build on everything that has been said before, and also some questions and etc. Yeah. Perfect. So let's wait for a couple of minutes now that everybody's joining. I see that already a lot of people are joining. So welcome everybody. We are very happy to have you here for the third webinar that we are organizing for the Women in Entrepreneurship Roadshow, the European Young Innovators Forum. This is a very special time for all of us. We are constantly learning about the new situation that we are all facing, and what we are trying to do with these webinars, as many others in the ecosystem and the community are trying to do, is to bring value to help us and support us in navigating this part. So not everybody has all the answers. What we are trying to do with this is to really provide some concrete elements that can help you to set your strategy or start adjusting something that we were all thrown into a few weeks ago, and how to adapt. So adaptability is key for success, and this is why we're organizing this. So while everybody's joining, I want to give some housekeeping rules. First of all, please write all your questions at any time. You have the Q&A tab, so you can write all the questions there. We will be organizing the session into separate slots. So compared to the other webinars, this will not be an open panel discussion. We will have more a workshop by the experts that have joined us and have a really substantial experience in what they are doing. So as I'm saying, this is the third event, and this is a continuation of the panel that we organized 10 days ago, And we felt that it was necessary to provide some more practical answers, practical tools, and this is what we are doing today. So this webinar is live stream on Zoom, but it's also live stream on YouTube. So please join us, share with your friends, any of your colleagues that you think might be useful. So with this, I will go to the next part of our webinar, is to tell you who we are. So the European Young Innovators Forum, we are one of the leading youth innovation organizations in Europe, and we are behind the Women in Entrepreneurship Roadshow initiative that is aimed to support women founders to secure more investment and to make the tech European ecosystem more diverse and inclusive. So what you can see in the next slide is the results that we have achieved so far. We have engaged with more than, now this number has increased to more than 600 women founders. 270 have been selected into our programs, and we are not doing this alone. We are doing this with more than 150 partners that are both in the US and Europe, more than 120 mentors, and more than 50 speakers and investors. So to create impact, to have an impact, we cannot do this alone. I want to thank them all for this. The agenda today, as I was telling you, it will be 50 to 60 minutes. We will have the speakers will be split with each group of the focuses of the key areas. So the first one is how to create your remote working toolkit. Yeah. Then the finding home working solutions, and then the mental well-being. This will be 3 parts. Every part, so it will be 5 minutes presentation and then 5 minutes Q&A. Yeah. And we want to thank once again our speakers and our experts that are here. So I want to start with Ivo Swapar, who will be starting. He's a remote work advocate and the co-founder of Remote How, one of the leaders, and if I understand correctly, is the first online remote work conference. Then we will continue with Taryn Nixon, who is an expert into user adoption and change management at Clear People. She has been working with all the Google Toolkit and also with with the Microsoft Toolkit. So she will give us very concrete experience on how to do, how to implement new tools to improve productivity remotely. Then we will continue with Matt Godard, who has for more than 20 years been working on remote work, and who is a director, senior product manager and author on this topic. And then we will finish with one of the most important things that we tend to neglect, but everybody is realizing that it's more and more important, which is the well-being. So Arctic Kashap-Ainsley, who will provide us an expert view on how to improve well-being, how to take care of the well-being of your team members, of yourself in this very crucial time. So without any more waiting time, I will go to Ivo and welcome.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
perfect. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So Ivo, so as we have been discussing today, as really you are one of the experts on remote working. So please tell us how has been your journey in promoting remote work, and what are the concrete learnings that you have taken from this journey that we can implement today with this crisis?
Yes, of course. This journey is already going since 2017, so quite a lot of data has been assembled, and there are obviously a lot of conclusions, but I guess that the one that is the strongest one, and it's also showing the direction of remote, how where we are going right now, is to help managers make sure that they know how to manage a remote, a distributed team, because the mid-level management is the one that before the all of a sudden remote situation due to COVID was the most resistant to the idea of having people working outside the office. It all starts with the mindset, right? Because it's a change, and people are oftentimes afraid of change. So so that was the key. Like the mindset was not there. In the current circumstances, it doesn't matter anymore. It's just happened. So now you need to adjust. So whenever, if we have leaders, managers listening to us, or team members that could pass on the knowledge to their managers, this is where we could find an answer to a successful remote work. And I wanted to share with you a couple of takeaways through a short presentation. Actually, I don't know if okay, yeah. So I will just briefly screen share. This is the presentation that we've been asked by Prezi to prepare, and it's been launched just on Monday. So I don't know if everyone can see my screen right now.
Yes, we do.
Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, so as I mentioned previously, managers are the key, but it's not that easy to make it work from the manager side. So I wanted just to take you on a very short journey to better understand why it's the key and how it could be tackled, and what are the key aspects that you should be looking at. So everything right now is around remote work. People are talking about tools and methods and approaches that should be taken, and this is exactly the right moment to look at what kind of actions will be effective in the remote environment, because things need to change. And what's really important is that people need to understand these challenges, because it's obvious that the challenges will occur. People will have challenges when it comes to performing their job, being engaged, and especially it will happen if companies are not prepared for that, if there is no training, if there is no setup around it. So just saying it out loud that you can fail with remote work, and as a manager you need to make sure that you will prevent your team from failing. So we wanted to address here 5 aspects what you should be addressing, and some of the stuff we'll be discussing later on this call, so I won't be going super much into details, but just a very short roundout through them. So the first one, obvious, is the lack of physical interactions with your employees. This is something that you need to make sure that you address, so people don't feel lonely, people have the replacement of the physical contact with your online engagement, because the lack of this engagement could lead to a lot of tough situations. And I will just give you an example. An angry email that is being sent without the context, without knowing that someone has a bad day, could lead into something bigger. So there is a lack of physical interactions. Managers need to address it. They need to engage more with their employees. The second aspect, social isolation and loneliness. Even before COVID, it was one of the biggest challenges for remote workers. I know that we will be talking about the mental health aspect, so I won't cover this much more in the details, but just saying it out loud, it needs to be addressed. The third aspect that needs to be addressed is an access to information. You're not in the office, you cannot say something out of the blue, which is actually often frustrating, that people are coming to and like, hey, I have this thing to tell you. So in the remote space, everything should be written down, everything should have the one common source of truth, because then it could become an obstacle to do your work right. So single source of truth and access to information. Fourth aspect that managers need to finally embrace, and this is one of my favorite parts, is that we need to start trusting each other. So trust and accountability are one of the crucial values that are building the culture of the remote team. And right now there is no way out. if you had challenges with trusting your employees in the remote environment, it's the foundation of the success. Last but not least, the fifth aspect that should be addressed right now, especially for people that are working remotely for the first time ever, they even didn't have an option to work from home from time to time before, individuals will struggle with productivity. And from the manager side, you need to deliver all the necessary processes, tools, and support, basically set up the work for them so they feel like they have everything to perform their job effectively. It's really up to managers to make sure that people are not struggling when performing tasks remotely. And then what are the quick wins? Because we just like address very broad aspects. So again, we have 4 aspects that you can implement right away into your day-to-day life, either as a manager or maybe suggest your manager that this is how you should be running this. So first is related to frequent check-ins and one-on-one meetings. So every direct report should have a recurring meeting with their manager. This is a must, and that also positively impacts the psychological safety. So what we can do here is to encourage video calls, always on video, to also have the body language, right? Practicing the right questions, the open-ended question, the follow-up questions from the manager during these meetings. And last but not least, radical candor model. So the model of an open feedback within the organization during these frequent check-ins and one-on-one meetings. This is the only way how the manager will know that you're struggling with something. The second thing, the culture of over communicating. This needs to become a habit. Because when you're remote, you have less options to communicate everything as in the office. So it's rather to over communicate and give people more information that you think it's necessary. So then you can adjust it and make some improvements out of this. But whenever you have an option, communicate what you're working on, what are the blockers, what are the challenges, if you wanted to discuss something. Then also make sure that everything is written down. I've also already mentioned this, but everything needs to be documented. There needs to be manual for almost every single thing going on within the organization. That really helps everyone to be on the same page. And last but not least, it's an obvious thing around meetings, but all meetings should have agenda and minutes that they are shared with everyone. So even if someone wasn't able to join, then they can still access this information. One of the last ones, helping to prioritize. That ties to the aspect of the challenges with the individual productivity. So in the remote environment, people will struggle, and it's up to managers to help them define the weekly priorities, help them even with like the time blocking in the calendar so people can focus more on deep work. And last but not least, also protect the team, their deep work, their workflows from requests from other departments. Like make sure that everyone has the proper environment to work. And then last but not least, the last low-hanging fruit is that all managers should really empower their team. And this again ties back to the trust and accountability. You're providing the necessary environment, but you need to also make sure that you're not taking everything on yourself, because in this case you will burn out. So the team has all the necessary tool stack. You're providing also options for virtual social interactions like the water cooler chats, so people can interact with each other and also help each other, so it's not always on you. And make sure that everyone is clear about the decisions that you are making, and that they can also make their independent decisions, but then it needs to be obviously communicated company-wide. Yeah, so this is like a very short overview, and I did it it in like, I don't know what, 7 minutes,
Yes.
compared to the whole program that we built with absolutely top subject matter experts from remote companies that lasts 6 weeks and takes around 20 hours to complete. So I can do so much in 7 minutes
Yes.
versus the 20 hours, but hopefully that just gives you a general grasp on the topic. So I'm sharing my screen, and I'm open for questions.
Yes, and thank you very much, Ivo, because indeed it was 7 minutes, but it is the objective of the webinar is to put up questions and topics there so that we can go deeper. I see already that we have one question, and please use the Q&A box, not the chat. But Malika L'Héritier, who is asking, it may be that employees and managers who are now more comfortable with remote working now, as they have been obliged to do so. What aspects of remote working and frameworks will stick around after this is happening? So, Ivo?
Yeah, so depending if the question is more geared towards if remote work will stay and if people will be allowed to work remotely, and if this way of working will continue, and the short answer is yes, and like the last Gallup survey that surveyed 350 CFOs from states showed that companies are already planning to shift part of their workforce into remote. And then if the question is more geared towards like what kind of rituals will stay, the same that existed before COVID, but that were just used by companies that are operating in a remote way. And I can give just like a few that existed and then should stay, like things around the work transparency. We should all be doing daily check-in and the checkout to show our team members and also the manager what we are working on, and then we are accountable for delivering this, right? What will also stay is a shift in the culture. People would be more honest, they will trust more each other, they would share the open feedback. So that would definitely stay, right? Then the other aspect that would also stay if people follow this best practice is to write everything down, and that more and more information within the company will be transparent. There are edge case scenarios, like for example Buffer, the company that is remote since day one, and they are like almost 100 people. Their full P&L is public. You can see how much the CEO is making, what was the revenue last month, what are their costs. So we will be leaning more towards a workplace where we trust each other, where we focus on the outcome, where more and more information is public, and we are leaning more towards a workplace where people are happier because we are simply meeting their expectations of the flexibility.
So thank you, Ivo, and I'm moving to Taryn, so that we go a bit more into tools. If you have any other questions to all the attendees, and also for all of those of you who are on YouTube, I know that we have like more than 30-40 people on YouTube now. Also, please write all the questions, and we will make sure that we are asking them to our speakers. So Taryn, please.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I don't have slides today, but I'm just here to talk to you about technologies and end users adopting technologies. So just to recap, I work in terms of the Microsoft space, and my role at Clear People is to get users to adopt, the Microsoft stack. So when we look at remote working under the current climate, what you tend to find is your remote working toolkit, it's really just about having the right tools to do the job, and to be able to understand how to use those technologies in your working day. So pre-pandemic type situation, we tend to find we go to the office and we work at a desk and we do our work how we used to, but we're now kind of thrown into this remote working world. And there's a lot of technologies in terms of Microsoft that can help people speed up decision-making processes and and do things a lot quicker and adopt these technologies in a way that's going to help them. So one of the parts to my role is to really, get people to look at using products such as Microsoft Teams. And at Clear People, we have a product called Atlas, which facilitates crisis communications, for example. So looking at these two spaces, it's really about selling the benefits to the end user and understanding how they work and how it's going to work for them in their remote environments. And I just want to recap and echo in terms of what Eva was saying in terms of business managers, because when I help clients to mobilize and adopt tools, I do pay attention to business managers too, because business managers are the people, that support the people on the ground, so to speak, and they're really going to be the people that are going to help produce change outcomes. They're going to guide their users through the change. So we do, in terms of a lot of facilitating and coaching managers in terms of the tools and how the tools can benefit them to then pass this on to the end users. So it's about selling the benefits of the tools for the productivity measures and how people can work remotely. For example, I can imagine now we're all working from home, right? And we're on Outlook or Gmail and so forth, but there may still be pockets of users who are sending emails as an attachment, as an example, and people are sending emails as attachments backwards and forwards. Matt, I can see you laughing because I think we work in the same kind of stream of work. So what that really means is I'm still working from home, but I'm still working how I used to in the office, and I'm sending emails as an attachment, and I'm having siloed conversations in my emails. Whereas I could kind of speed up my productivity by using collaborative tools and collaborating in a different way to do things quicker. So I have more time to make my online strength class if I want to, or go outside in the garden and have a bit of sun in my working day. So I'm working a lot more productive. I'm working a lot more quicker using the latest technologies. I'm having video calls and I'm collaborating with my team and I'm getting things done quicker. So I am feeling less frustrated in my working day. And I'll give you an example because I work very much in our Atlas space, which is like a communication site, and I work on Teams. I've only received 4 emails in Outlook today, because I collaborate fully in Teams to an end goal. So my role is educating people how to use the tools. And once you break down those barriers and people really understand the benefits, you then start to see productivity ramp up. And then to echo back to what Eva was saying in terms of what might happen after we go through this kind of, phase that we're in now, will people go back to working in the old way? I think that what people tend to find will notice is the return of investment on adopting these technologies. Because if you get people to work as efficiently, you're not getting 2 people to do one job. You're essentially allowing the person to do their job efficiently. They feel satisfied and you retain that loyalty and people want to keep working. So you'll see that there will be like almost a saving from adopting the new technologies, but not having to go to the office, the desk space, and use paper and the printers and all of that goes into working in an actual physical office.
Thank you, Taryn. And so that's very useful and interesting. But what I would like to know, building on what you said, is how can we navigate through all this inflation of tools and how to measure the most efficient tool, basically. How can we establish that toolkit, meaning there are so many tools out there. How can we choose? And from a general perspective, what are the key metrics or key indicators that we should look into?
So when you look at the technologies, you get a lot of everything. So you can do just about anything in any of these tools. You've got your OneDrive, you've got your Teams, you've got your SharePoint. And when it comes to using the technologies, that's where it's about what the user journey for yourself as an individual. So what is the entry point to the technology of what you want to use? Do you want to start in your, your teams? You're going to work on a project and you're going to work in a workspace and use that one platform to use that technology, as opposed to messaging people on WhatsApp and then going into a chat on a workspace. So you want to kind of use the one productivity suite that you have and not pull in all various other parts, because then that helps speeding up your productivity. Now, the other part to that is, which I could speak for hours on this call and educating on the actual tools, which I am running live events on my LinkedIn. So the other part to that is education, 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 and guidance. People need guidance about what to use when it comes to the technologies.
Thank you. And looking before going to Matt, is there any questions that our audience wants to ask? Please use the Q&A. We'll have some time also at the end of this webinar to come back on the questions, but please feel free. If you are facing any particular obstacle in user adoption, you have now an expert in front of you that can give you very useful advice there. And also, if you are thinking what should be your choice in different type of tools, also please share with us your question in the Q&A. The experts have made the time to answer your questions today. So thank you very much, Taryn, for this. Now I'm going back to Matt. So Matt, please tell us, how did you see from your 20 years experience in this remote work, the evolution? And now if we are talking about really concrete recommendations that you would give based on what we have just heard from Ivo and Taryn, and how to take the productivity to the next stage.
I was on mute, which is always the challenge when you're doing calls, isn't it? I think so. What I've noticed over the last 20 years, specifically over the last sort of 10 years of remote work adoption, really, is that we have gone from there being a very limited amount of tools that profess to support your productivity and your collaboration and the way that you interact with your clients to this myriad of other tools, and they reflect, I think they reflect on two aspects of the remote working debate. So I think first of all, you've got the digital nomads or the individualistic people who tend to use a lot of chat, or they're sort of working as if they're the center of the world and they're broadcasting out. And then you've got companies such as Basecamp and Buffer and other companies like that, who I think have been a lot more mature in their the way that they have adopted remote working, of course, and and they're sort of moving now towards an asynchronous communication model, which is why you're seeing the rise of Microsoft Teams, which is a great product, and you've got Slack, which is also a great product, and then you've got a lot of individual tools such as Loom and Yak and other things which allow you to do asynchronous communication. And I think that's where the interesting things to note about where we are now. So we haven't, up until recently, the drive from remote working has tended to be much more of an individual pursuit. And people have come to their organization and said, I want to remote work, and give me the tools, give me the process to support me doing that. What we're seeing now, obviously forced by coronavirus, is that companies are having to say, oh, you're going to have to go remote, and oh my, this is the only tools that we've got available to us in our stack. So, use this to move forward. And I think what that does really is kind of, it creates a bit of a vacuum of process, to be honest with you. And one of the things that we've said in Ready for Remote and other things is that the fundamental principles, and Ivo mentioned this and Taryn did too, but I think the fundamental principles for good remote working is to create trust, to have clarity, and to create visibility. And the only way that you can do that is by using tools which support those things. So as Taryn mentioned, and then which I find crazy, is that you have people who work remotely who will tend to try to do everything with email. Now, email obviously is a great tool for remote communication, but it's a terrible tool for remote collaboration. And the reason it's terrible is because everything happens in a closed channel of communication. Therefore, conversations can get fragmented, and you don't know whether somebody has changed a document somewhere, hasn't shared it with the rest of the thread, and it just becomes very difficult. And your company, your organization, therefore, is less productive because their ability to see everything that's going on is limited. Whereas if you look at tools such as Microsoft Teams and Slack, they're designed primarily to support open channels of communication. So you have your channels lists, and you can have specific topics and areas and that, and you're having those conversations there. There is no way, therefore, that the people that elect into those channels can't be aware of what's going on. If you take this back to where we were with, when you're in the office, you're not in a little cubicle with, being forced with headphones where you're not aware of what's going on with you. You know what's going on. You overhear conversations. You can see that somebody is working or that somebody is being productive because their assets are available to you to see that in the environment. Therefore, oh, hold on, my dog's going to bark. This is another situation you need to deal with in the remote working. So their assets are in the environment. You have to replicate that within your digital collaboration tool. So you have to use the open channels in Slack or in Microsoft Teams or in Basecamp or whichever tool that it is you're using. And that's where, as part of the 3 fundamental principles, that's where the visibility aspect of what we talk about comes in. And that is, what tools are you using to make your process visible, to make your tasks and goals and outcomes visible, and how do you make the conversation visible to the rest of the organization that you're working with? Also, it's worth noting, and I know everyone will have seen this quote on LinkedIn and Twitter and that, but we have to remember that at the moment, we are not working remotely. We're not working from home. We're at home working during a crisis. And what that does is that puts extra pressure. What that does is that puts extra pressure on managers to be empathetic towards their staff. You have to be aware of the pressures that everyone else is under. I've worked remotely for 10, 15 years, and I'm finding it difficult to work through this process. And the reason I'm finding it difficult is because I've got a head full of worries about my friends, my families, and my loved ones. I've got a head full of worries about, just everything else that's going on in my home. My daughter is doing online education. She's learning, whilst I'm trying to do meetings and things like that. And actually, the pressures that I'm under now are completely different from the pressure would be under normally through remote work. And so that's from a practical point of view, I think that we need to support our managers to understand what works or what doesn't work for us in terms of our current setup. I actually think it's worth considering how to use asynchronous communication now to enable people to manage their own time, yet still be productive.
Can you tell us what is asynchronous communication?
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
So when I say asynchronous communication, what I mean is that when you're using Slack and Skype and Teams, we're used to using instant messages. We're used to expecting that people will reply to us immediately. At the moment, it's not possible for people to reply immediately to things. It doesn't mean to say they're not working. What it means is that they're distracted by what's going on at home. So how do you use things like Loom or Yak or even voice memos through Slack or Teams or what have you, so that you can be clear about what it is you want somebody in your channel to do, what you want them to understand, and then allow them to consume that or use that data independently and then come back at a time which is convenient for them to respond. Now, you might think that it will slow down your productivity cycle. In the long run, it won't, because what happens is you have an ongoing level of communication. And if you are aware of what your expectations of other people are, then you can make it clear through, through clarity, that you know, I'm working on such and such, I need to know an answer in the next hour or so, and then people know what's expected of them. And these are the tools that we need to be thinking, or these are the tools we need to use now to manage this impact. I hope in the long run that people use more asynchronous tools than maybe immediate real-time tools, because I think that that will make everyone feel a lot more relaxed with their remote working setups, and much more control over their time.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. And I have a question that was very practical that we can also link to Taryn and Matt on how to organize your online space. And I think that this is quite interesting. And what are the best practices in terms of file creations? And this is also related to what you were just telling us about asynchronous communication, how to ensure that there is enough tracking, but also that nobody gets lost and can work collaboratively. And then after that, I will go to Artie to try to bring all of this together and work on what's most important in a company, which is the human being. So Taryn and then Matt, and then I'm moving to Artie.
Okay, so in terms of like your collaborative workspace, you really want to understand the technology, and I can break down the three components really quickly. Your OneDrive, I'm talking in the Microsoft space. Google has its own stuff, but this is predominantly like where I exist. So if you're looking at like your tools, like your OneDrive is your personal space, your team space is, so OneDrive is me, your Teams is we, us on a project, and your SharePoint is us as the company. So it's the me, we, us in terms of the technologies. So when you want to go into your collaborative space on Teams, you need to understand what is the team versus what is the channel. The team is your workspace where you're going to get the end goal done, and your channel is the topic in relation to the team. So if you're working on the Project Mustang, it's a big client coming up to an end goal, you want that space to be named relevant to that particular project or that department. And then you want your channels to be relevant to the stream of work, for example, on that project, and then collaborate in those areas. Essentially, even when you look at the likes of Slack and Google and so forth, you want it to be clear of where you're going to go, because the point is you want people to adopt the tools, they know where they're going, and they know why they are there. So keeping it nice and succinct will help people stay in that space and not revert back to the emails, as Matthew and I discussed, and have those siloed conversations in your emails. You want to have the open ones in the workspace, whether that's the Slack or the Microsoft or the Google items that you have. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Matthew.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I think the one thing I will say is that people seem to have a fear of creating new channels or creating new workspaces or teams in order to discuss something specific. They're always worried that they're going to pollute this digital space with, and basically then they'll get lots of notifications, and you know, everything will just go crazy. Have a lot of very specific channels and retire them when that that task is done. So if you've got a temporary project that's coming up, create a new project channel, create a new team where you can discuss that. Once it's done, archive it. You know, you don't need that anymore. And then, oh my goodness, I completely forgot what I was going to say. But then, yeah, just I would, you know, just make sure that you, you know, create those spaces.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So I'm moving to Artie, and really thank you for waiting and to provide also very concrete experience. And I think this is for what we have heard in terms of feedback from our audience throughout the webinars. Well-being is one of the most important elements. You as a chief well-being at Deloitte, you have a lot of practical insights that we would love to hear, and also based on what we have just heard. And please, to our audience, share with us very candidly any question that you would have in terms of how you can engage your team, how you can take care of yourself, your team. This is the moment, and we will be sharing that. So please use the Q&A channel.
Thanks. So yeah, thank you for having me. I think everyone has kind of mentioned really important things that probably all bring it together, because everything is quite relevant, and whether it's the tool you're using or the technology or how you manage your teams, there is a level of well-being that has to be put into everything. And I think similar to what Ivo started out with is well-being has always been important. I think if anything now, it's just becoming a little bit more prevalent given the pandemic that we're going through. And Matthew kind of alluded to it also in that when he started talking about, having a daughter at home who's doing online school, worrying about his, family and friends. If we just take a step back and think about the current situation that we're in, we're dealing with a whole host of anxiety and stress right now. So there's the whole fear of the unknown with the whole situation, like when is lockdown going to be over? When is this going to be, sorted out? When are we going to go back to normal, quote unquote? There's this stress of having to look after and or be separated from people that were, really nervous and scared about their well-being. So, whether that's vulnerable parents or family or friends or whatever. It's also, if you are taking care of vulnerable people, it's an added thing that you have to add into your day. There's obviously this whole element of job and financial stress. So with companies starting to furlough employees or people losing their jobs or people not being able to work given the current environment, you're looking at a whole host of financial stress that is now falling on people. And that includes things like investments you might be getting for funding for your startups, or for like thinking about the market slowdown and how that might impact your business, and so on and so forth. You're also dealing with the confinement. And if remote working already contributed to a little bit of isolation, the confinement now that we're living in is just taking it one step forward with putting so many more limitations on what you can and cannot do in your outside world. There's also people dealing with illnesses, for example, and they have to kind of, fall down the chain in terms of how they can get the support and help that they need, and just having to think about that. There's also this aspect of managing your family at home. So kids that are having to be homeschooled, taking care of small children, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, the list is huge and I could probably still go on, but it's thinking about all of that and then thinking about how do you manage it for yourself, and in turn, how do you manage it for your teams? As a manager, your number one priority is probably to lead by example. So the way that you take care of yourself is the way that everyone who is around you is going to start to follow and take that as, right, I should, it's setting a tone. It should be what I follow. And I think that there's a lot of things that people said that are quite relevant, but it's now just embedding the well-being components into them. So a couple of tips that I have in terms of things that you can start to do. If we think about the check-in aspects that Ivo mentioned at the beginning, so check-ins are great when they're daily or even a couple times a day. It doesn't matter the frequency as long as they're there. But the importance is using those check-ins to not just focus on the tasks, but actually focusing on the well-being of your employees. So do a check-in, like how is everyone feeling today on a scale of 0 to 10? Tell me how you're feeling from a well-being standpoint. What's contributing to that? What can we do to help? It's also just trying to gauge and build in that empathy into those conversations, and then understanding at the output of that how you can support one another. So is it that, for example, someone in your team is really stressed today because they have to take care of their child and do some of the homeschooling for them? And okay, well, as a manager, does that mean I need to allow them a little bit of a break during the day? Can we pick up things as a team together, and so on? So it's just understanding what people are dealing with and bringing that conversation into everything you do. The other thing is, similar to this webinar, is learning how you can use various platforms to educate employees. So how can you educate people that maybe perhaps didn't think about or prioritize well-being, can now do that, but also navigate through all the different tools and channels that are available to them. So can you do webinars with your employees? Can you have education sessions where people can find out things, like whether it's, what meditation app are people using? How can I embed mindfulness into what I'm doing? That kind of stuff. Increasing transparency is a huge thing. And Taryn and Matthew talked about some really great tools. And Ivo talked about a lot about communications and just opening up those channels, but taking that transparency one step further. So it's not just about the transparency on what I'm working with, but it's the transparency around what am I dealing with as a human, and how can you support me as in my team, and how can you just be aware of what that looks like. And then that aligns to the encouraging communications and the social interactions. So the social interactions are great, and you can do that through video calls and so on. But the other thing is to think about how can you, do those coffee chats or smoothie breaks that you would have with people before. How can you do that on video calls, right? So I've heard of a lot of people doing coffee breaks through Zoom, for example, and you sit together and you're having your coffee and you have your informal conversation, but it's improving that social interaction. I mean, in our personal lives, we're using tools like House Party to connect with people or FaceTime. So it's just thinking about how can we bring that into the office setting to make sure we're not losing that social interaction. And then one thing you mentioned at the beginning actually was around your physical space. So there are some people that have never had to work from home before and don't necessarily have an office space. So what's happening is that work life and work, they're blending into one. And so what's happening is that people are finding it very hard to kind of unplug, and you get up and you start working right away and everything's kind of around all the time. But whether you have like a designated desk, computer and all that, just set up a space in your living situation where you can just, this is my office space, this is my workspace. And if you don't have that luxury, then it's about opening everything up at the beginning of the day and closing it down at the end of the day so that you don't have to look at it in the hours that you're not working. And I think actually that links really nicely to the two things that I think are by far one of the most important is routine and boundaries. So having a routine every day. I think the thing is that in a situation like this, we are very easily thrown out of routine. So it's things like when we used to get up and go to the gym, and we used to get up and do, and then commute into the office, and on the commute we might read a book. Like all those things are kind of gone out the way. But how can you still have some of that? So I know people that are, okay, I would have spent a half an hour commuting now and reading. So instead of doing my commute, I'm going to sit in my bed and read for half an hour. Or if I would go to the gym, there's so many online classes, you can take advantage of that. But it's adding a bit of routine and structure into your day as much as you can, and then setting those boundaries. And then using all the things that we've talked about of the communication, the transparency around those boundaries. So my working hours are going to be, 9 to 6, and in 9 to 6, I'm okay to do this, and after 6 I'm not available, or before 9 I'm not available, and so on. I've heard about some people that are managing their kids at home, for example, and having to share homeschooling along with both parents working, and they've done stuff where between 10:30 and 12 I don't answer emails because I'm with my kids, and then when my husband takes over, then I'm fine to kind of go back to it, or so on. But it's just thinking about what those chunks are. And I think in all of it, there's no one size fits all. I think everyone needs to sit back and think about what they need for themselves. And as a result of what they need for themselves, then thinking about how they can embed that into everything.
Thank you, Artie. And we have already received 2 questions. I invite our audience to ask other questions too, but let's take and build on what you have just said. So Malika, she was asking them about how to find the right balance between work and client deliverables and homeschooling, and what are the tips, and how can she help, or how can a manager help to get the team to deliver while respecting these blurred boundaries?
Yeah, so the balance is going to have to be, it's going to be different for everyone, right? Again, there's no one size fits all. But it's also understanding, like maybe one person has way more on their plate home-wise than another person. So it's also thinking about how can you help accommodate what people need, and then how can you maybe scatter some of the responsibilities so that the team can kind of come in together. And I think tools, for example, like Teams is great for something like that, because if you're all working on something, then you can easily share, like, this is where I've got to on it, great, someone can pick it up and work on it from that. So it's just thinking about how you can all come together as a team. I know that doesn't really necessarily give a clear-cut answer on, it's 30% this, that, or the other, but it's really about sitting back and thinking about what can someone actually give in this time, given that we're dealing with so much, and then figuring out how can we maybe shuffle things around to help that person.
Thank you. And Tim is asking us also about this blurred line between work and home. But I think he's asking a very interesting question in terms of how do you manage time zone differences?
Oh, yeah.
So I think this is an interesting one to deal with.
Well, I mean, time zones were there before, right? So they are not anything new that we're dealing with in this pandemic. And so I think it's about going back to your boundaries. So it's, you know, in for example, in Deloitte, we work in a 24-hour business. If you think about it, we're a global organization. So I can, you know, lock off my laptop at 6 o'clock on any given day. And then by the time I wake up the next morning and open my computer, I have a whole host of emails that have come in through overnight. So it's just around sticking to your boundaries, right? And then communicating those boundaries. So I have something that sits on my signature, for example, that says something around, you know, I work between, at Deloitte, we work between the hours of, you know, 8 to 6 or whatever it is. But we also promote flexible working. And working for when it suits me. So if I send you this email now, you don't have to respond. It's just working best for me. And it's just thinking a little bit about how you can use stuff like that to communicate to people so that you're not feeling like you have to be on all the time. Again, you're working from home, but you're not having to give up your whole life for work right now. Just because, not because we're in isolation, does that mean that we have to work 24 hours a day, essentially?
Yeah, if I could just add to that as well, like a really, because I operate as a consultant, so I always feel like, you know, I'm just always, you know, working with clients and so forth. Just one real simple tip is I just close the laptop, put it in the drawer and the phone, and I do not bring it out until 9 a.m. That's it. Because, you know, I would get in the office at 9. Now, of course, my company, it's not that that's the problem. It's just that's how I mentally do it for myself. If it's closed and it goes in, that's, you know, the day is complete. And then my commute, you know, like I would normally do like a 45-minute commute. So now I wake up and I found an online class, and I do that because I'm mentally like, okay, that's the pretend commute in my head. And then the lunch break now is like, I will close the laptop and go to it, you know, away from the desk, just to keep that, you know, that kind of structure and the boundaries in place. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of talk around people picking up different hobbies now. So I know people that are using like art, for example, and doing a lot of painting and drawing in the mornings or at lunch or in the evenings, or reading more. So just thinking about, in some ways, some of this, like this period, as crazy as it is and as unknown as it comes with, as much unknown as it comes with, it's also a time we're never going to get back in some cases. So in situations where people are getting to spend this much time more with their families and or having a little bit more downtime in the evenings and stuff, and not having to worry about long commutes, it's about also making sure that to manage your well-being, it's not just about managing your well-being in the office setting, but how do you take care of yourself outside and create a little bit more space to build habits that, for example, that you'll want to bring back into the workforce once, you know, this kind of all lifts.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting, very useful. All these tips. Matt, do you wanted to add something on this, or? Well,
what I was going to say was, I think Artie hit the nail on the head, really. I think a lot of these challenges existed before remote working.
Yeah.
What we're seeing now is because people are in the home setting rather than the office setting, they're actually more aware of the blurred boundaries between, you know, their work and their personal lives, and you know, they're obviously impacted and more about that as well. And I think there is a great opportunity for people to take a step back, look at their routine, look at their commitments, and then say, actually, has the balance been wrong for me before this? One of the things that I'll say that you know, I've had to consider more of through this time is actually, I tend to break my work down into much smaller chunks than I used to. So I may well have 40 minutes of dedicated focus on something where I would switch off the tools that I'm using and actually focus on the work I need to do. And then what that allows me to do is, if there's been an interruption, if there's something going on in the home, or if there's something else coming on, then I can actually then switch to that, focus on getting that done for a period of time as well, and then move back to work. So although I'm distributing the work I need to achieve throughout the day, I'm not shortchanging any one of those activities in terms of my focus. And I kind of think that's quite a useful tip for people as well. So don't think about it as a 9 till 5:30. Think about it as achieving the outcomes or the tasks that you need to do within a day.
Yes, and very interesting, and thank you very much, Matt, Taryn, and Artie, and Ivo, who had to leave us. But I think it has been super interesting, super useful. Really, it was a very nice continuation of the discussion that we started 10 days ago. I have now a question from Armina, who is asking whether we can see and receive this recording of the webinar, and the answer is yes. It will be on YouTube. You can share it. There has been a very useful and practical advice. And if you have any other specific question, you can channel that through us, and we will see if our experts can engage with you or through us with some additional tips. Having said this, I want to really thank you for your time, Artie, Taryn, Matt, and Ivo, for taking time to talk to the community, to really provide some concrete answers, launch or create some additional questions that are useful to start creating answers. So thank you very much. I really hope to stay engaged also with you. We also want to thank the partners that are always contributing to make this a success. You see that there are many partners that are participating. We are doing another webinar towards the end of April, where we are going to bring experts on public and EU funding to see what are the answers that public authorities are providing in terms of available funding for companies. So we will be bringing experts from the European Investment Fund. We'll be bringing experts from the European Commission and the European Innovation Council, and also some other experts that will be joining us. Thank you very much for the experts that have been with us today. Let's connect and let's stay in touch. And really, I wish you all the best, and really stay safe and stay healthy in all this period. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.